She screamed before she understood why. The sound ripped out of her chest, sharp and involuntary, cutting through the hushed luxury of the first-class cabin, like glass shattering in a church. Heads snapped up. Conversations died mid-sentence. Somewhere behind her, a champagne flute froze inches from a man's lips. For half a second, no one moved. Then the pain arrived. Hot. Blinding. Wrong. Alyssa Morgan stood frozen in the aisle, her right arm bent at an angle. Arms were never meant to bend, her breath trapped high in her throat. A man's hand was still locked around her wrist, fingers dug in too deep. Skin pressed white against bone. The grip was not panicked. It was controlled. Possessive. Deliberate. Across from her, Gregory Whitman's jaw was clenched so tight a muscle twitched along his cheek. His face was flushed, not with surprise, but irritation. The kind that came from being challenged in a place where he expected obedience. For a brief electric moment, the entire cabin hovered between disbelief and fear. Suspended at 30,000 feet, with nowhere to look but at them. No one spoke. No one intervened. Cream leather seats, polished walnut trim, soft amber lighting designed to calm people who paid for calm. A space engineered to feel insulated from consequences. And in the center of it, a woman who had done nothing wrong, being physically restrained because a man believed she did not belong. That was how it began. But the story did not start in the air. It started on the ground, where judgment is quieter and cruelty wears a better suit. An hour earlier, Terminal 4 at John F. Kennedy International Airport breathed with the stale impatience of 1,000 delayed lives. The air smelled of burnt coffee and disinfectant. Roller bags rattled over tile. Voices overlapped in a low, constant murmur. Departure boards blinked with quiet authority, announcing futures in orderly rows of white text. Alyssa stood near Gate B-27, holding her boarding pass between her fingers, as if it might dissolve if she loosened her grip. First class. Seat 4. A. The letters were crisp, real, still unfamiliar. She checked her phone again. No new emails, no messages from Chicago. The promotion paperwork had cleared 48 hours ago. Senior Vice President of Operations. 5 years of 12-hour days. 5 years of swallowing doubt in rooms full of men who spoke louder than they listened. 5 years of proving she belonged in spaces that never quite felt built for her. This flight to London was supposed to be a pause, a breath, a victory lap she did not know how to enjoy. She adjusted the strap of her leather tote on her shoulder. Inside it sat her laptop, her life. Every projection, every risk model, every decision that had carried her here. The weight of it grounded her, reminded her why she was standing in the priority boarding area instead of watching from behind the rope. She was reading the departure screen when she felt it, the shift in air. Someone standing too close. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, nasal, tired of waiting to be obeyed. Alyssa turned. The man in front of her was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a navy bespoke suit that announced money without apology, a silk pocket square folded with studied care, a watch that caught the overhead lights when he moved his wrist, heavy and unmistakably expensive. His hair was perfectly combed, not a strand out of place, the kind of grooming that suggested control as a lifestyle. Gregory Whitman did not ask permission to exist in spaces. He occupied them. "You're blocking the lane," he said, eyes flicking past her as if she were luggage left unattended. Alyssa glanced down. The floor, the rope. She was not blocking anything. "I'm sorry," she said, stepping half an inch to the side anyway. Old habits, reflexive politeness. Gregory scoffed. He tapped a platinum credit card against his thigh, a small, impatient rhythm. "The priority lane is for first class and Diamond Medallion members. Economy boards back there, near the food court." His eyes returned to her then, traveled slowly, her shoes, sensible, her tailored blazer, professional but understated, her hair pulled back neatly, natural, intentional. His gaze lingered a beat too long, as if searching for confirmation of a conclusion he had already reached. Heat bloomed low in Alyssa's chest. Familiar, controlled, the same heat she felt in boardrooms when someone explained her own data back to her. "I'm in the right place," she said evenly. "I'm flying first class." The laugh that escaped him was short and sharp, disbelieving. "Sure you are." He tilted his head, studying her now with open skepticism. "Upgrade, standby, employee travel. Which is it?" "That's none of your business." She turned away, facing the gate agent. The woman behind the counter was typing rapidly, jaw tight, eyes tired. Alyssa could see the wear in her posture, the quiet calculation of how many problems were left in the day. Gregory leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to ensure it carried. "It becomes my business when I pay $12,000 for a ticket and expect a certain environment." The couple behind him shifted uncomfortably. The woman stared at the floor. The man pretended to read his phone. "They just let anyone up front these days," Gregory muttered. "Corporate cards, diversity optics." Alyssa's fingers curled around her boarding pass. The paper crinkled softly under the pressure. "Don't engage," she told herself. "You are not here to teach him anything. You are here to get on a plane." The gate agent lifted the microphone. "We are now inviting our first-class passengers to board Flight 882 to London Heathrow." Alyssa stepped forward. Gregory moved first. He shoved past her with practiced entitlement, slamming his boarding pass onto the scanner before the agent could greet him. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Whitman," the agent said, forcing a smile that did not reach her eyes. "About time," he snapped, already pulling the pass from her hand. He strode down the jet bridge without looking back. Alyssa approached next. The agent glanced up at her, something soft flickering across her expression. Sympathy. Recognition. "Welcome, Ms. Morgan. Seat 4. A. Enjoy your flight." Alyssa exhaled, a long, careful breath. The bridge ahead narrowed, the roar of the terminal fading behind her as she stepped forward into the quiet corridor that led to the aircraft. She did not know yet that the man walking ahead of her would decide, before they even reached the cabin door, that she was an error to be corrected. The transition from the jet bridge into the aircraft felt like crossing an invisible border. Sound softened. Light warmed. The chaos of the terminal fell away behind a thick door, sealing everyone inside a carefully curated illusion of calm. Alyssa stepped into first class, and the air changed immediately. It smelled faintly of citrus wipes and expensive fabric. Everything here was designed to reassure people that nothing bad could happen to them. She turned left. 8 suites, 2 aisles. Privacy shells curved like open palms, cream leather, walnut panels polished to a dull glow. It was intimate in a way that made every movement feel observed. Alyssa scanned the seat numbers as she walked, her heels clicking softly against the carpet. 1A, 1K, 2A, 2K. She slowed without meaning to, a small, irrational hope tightening in her chest. Please don't be near me. She reached row 4, her steps stopped. Across the aisle, already standing, already irritated, was Gregory Whitman. He was wrestling a carry-on into the overhead bin with unnecessary force, shoving it upward as if daring gravity to challenge him. The bag scraped against the metal lip, the sound sharp and ugly in the quiet cabin. When it finally slid into place, he dropped his arm and turned. Their eyes met. The recognition landed like a physical blow. Gregory's face shifted. First confusion, then disbelief, then something darker. A curl of disgust pulled at the corner of his mouth as his gaze flicked from the seat number above Alyssa's head to the boarding pass still in her hand. "You've got to be kidding me," he said. The words weren't loud, but they carried. A man in the row ahead paused mid-motion, hand frozen on his seat divider. A woman, 2 rows back, glanced up from her phone. Gregory threw his hands out slightly, palms up, a performance of outrage. "This is unbelievable." Alyssa didn't respond. She stepped into her suite, placed her tote gently beneath the console, and reached up for the overhead bin. Her movements were slow, deliberate, controlled. She could feel her pulse climbing anyway, a quickening drum beneath her ribs. "Excuse me," Gregory snapped. A flight attendant appeared almost instantly, as if summoned by the tension itself. She was young, early 20s, blonde hair pulled back into a neat bun. Her name tag read Chloe. Her smile arrived a fraction of a second too late. "Yes, Mr. Whitman?" she asked. He didn't look at her. He pointed at Alyssa without turning his head. "I requested a secluded seat." Chloe blinked. "I'm sorry, sir." "I have sensitive documents to review," he continued, voice sharpening. "I cannot have someone sitting directly across from me." Alyssa felt it then. The subtle shift. The way the cabin seemed to lean in, waiting. She kept her eyes on the overhead bin, slid it closed and lowered herself into her seat. "Sir," Chloe said carefully, "these suites have privacy dividers. Once we're airborne, you can raise the partition." "I don't want a divider," Gregory snapped. "I want distance." The word hung there. Distance, not privacy, not quiet. Distance. Chloe's smile faltered. "Unfortunately, the cabin is fully booked." Gregory's jaw worked as he looked directly at Alyssa for the first time since boarding. His eyes moved over her with open disdain. "Then move her." Alyssa's fingers tightened briefly on the armrest. She did not look up. "Sir," Chloe said, her voice firmer now, "Ms. Morgan is in her assigned seat." Gregory let out a short, humorless laugh. "Is she?" Chloe hesitated. A single beat. Long enough for him to press. "Check her ticket," he said. "I smell a system glitch." Alyssa lifted her gaze then. Slowly. Her eyes met Chloe's. There was no pleading in them. No apology. Just a quiet steadiness that asked one simple question. "Are you really going to do this?" Chloe swallowed. "I've already verified her boarding pass." Gregory scoffed. "Of course you did." The silence thickened. Alyssa could hear the low hum of the aircraft systems beneath it all, a mechanical breathing that made the moment feel suspended, unreal. "Fine," Gregory said finally, dropping into his seat with a sharp motion. "But if she makes a single sound, I'm filing a formal complaint." He buckled his seatbelt hard, the click loud and aggressive. Alyssa stared straight ahead. The screen in front of her was dark, reflecting a faint, distorted image of her face. Calm on the surface. Tension threaded through her jaw, her shoulders, her spine. She had dealt with microaggressions before. She knew the script, the sideways looks, the assumptions disguised as concern. But this was different. This felt volatile, like a match already struck. The rest of the cabin boarded in uneasy quiet. Conversations were subdued. No one met her eyes for long. Chloe returned with a tray of pre-departure drinks, her movements careful now, hyper-aware. Gregory accepted his champagne without a word. Alyssa declined. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Gregory pulled his phone from his pocket and placed it to his ear. "No," he said loudly. "I don't care what the contract says." Chloe froze mid-aisle. "Tell them I'm walking if they don't sign by noon," Gregory continued, his voice booming in the enclosed space. "I'm not negotiating from weakness." Alyssa closed her eyes. "Sir," Chloe said, approaching carefully, "we need all devices in airplane mode. We're taxiing." Gregory waved her off without looking at her. "I'm closing a multi-million-dollar deal, sweetheart." "Give me a second." He turned slightly away from her and lowered his voice just enough to ensure it still carried. "Yeah, the service here is abysmal, and I'm stuck sitting across from some affirmative action case who thinks she owns the place." Alyssa's breath caught. The words landed with a dull, physical weight. She reached for her headphones and slipped them on, turning the volume up, but the noise cancellation let the low frequencies through. Every syllable still found her. She focused on the window, the tarmac sliding past, the blur of ground crew in fluorescent vests. She thought about London, the boardroom, the presentation she had rehearsed in hotel mirrors and empty conference rooms, logistics, supply chains, margins and efficiencies, a future she had built piece by piece. The plane turned. Something cold and wet struck her arm, then her cheek. Alyssa gasped, eyes flying open. Champagne dripped from her shoulder, soaked into the silk of her blouse, ran down her forearm in sticky rivulets. Gregory was standing halfway into the aisle, his glass empty, his expression one of exaggerated surprise. "Oh," he said flatly. "Turbulence." The plane had barely lurched, not enough to spill a drink unless someone wanted it to spill. "You should really be more careful about where you put your elbows," he added. Alyssa stared at him. Her arm had been firmly on the armrest, well within her suite. Her hands shook as she reached for a napkin. "You did that on purpose," she said. The cabin seemed to inhale. "Sit down," Gregory barked. His face reddened, anger flaring hot and fast. "Don't accuse me of anything." Chloe appeared, alarm flashing across her features. "Sir, please take your seat." "That's enough," came a new voice. The purser moved quickly down the aisle. Maggie. Late 30s, hair pulled back tight. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. She took in the spilled champagne, Alyssa's soaked blouse, Gregory's posture, the way his body leaned forward just a little too far. "She's harassing me," Gregory said immediately, pointing. She knocked the drink out of my hand. Alyssa's throat tightened. He threw it at me. Gregory lunged forward a fraction of an inch. Alyssa flinched despite herself. Maggie stepped between them without hesitation. Her voice dropped, controlled and dangerous. "Sir, take your seat. Now." Gregory sneered, straightening his jacket. "You wouldn't dare." But he sat. Alyssa pressed back into her seat, heart hammering. The cabin returned to a tense, brittle quiet. Outside, the engines roared as the plane accelerated down the runway. She told herself the worst was over. She was wrong. The seatbelt sign chimed off with a soft electronic note that felt absurdly gentle for what it unleashed. Before Alyssa could even register the sound, Gregory's buckle clicked open. He was already on his feet. He didn't head for the lavatory. He stepped into the aisle and reached up. Alyssa turned just in time to see his hand disappear into the overhead bin above her seat. Her bin. "Hey," she said, standing instinctively. "That's my bag." Gregory didn't look at her. He rummaged through the compartment with careless aggression, shifting items that weren't his, fingers brushing fabric and metal without permission. His movements were unhurried, entitled, like a man searching through his own property. "I'm just making room," he muttered. Before she could move closer, he grabbed her tote by one strap and yanked it down. The bag hit the aisle floor with a dull, sickening crack, a sound that didn't belong in a space like this. Alyssa froze. Her breath stalled halfway in. Gregory looked down at the bag, then back up at her. His mouth curved into a thin smile. Not drunk, not sloppy. Precise. "Oops," he said. "Clumsy me." The rage rose fast, burning away the fear in a sudden, dizzying rush. Alyssa dropped to her knees beside the bag, hands trembling as she unzipped it. The laptop inside lay twisted at an unnatural angle. The screen was spiderwebbed with fractures, black lines radiating outward like a wound. Her throat closed. "You broke my laptop," she said. Gregory leaned closer, invading her space. She could smell his cologne, sharp and expensive. "Prove it." Her head snapped up. "What?" "It's your word against mine," he said calmly. "And frankly, darling, People like you don't win that argument." Something in his eyes shifted, hardened, enjoying this now. "I'm a job creator," he continued, voice low. "Your background noise. That's enough." The voice came from behind her. Alyssa turned. The man from 2A was standing in the aisle. He was tall, lean, dressed in a simple grey sweater and dark slacks. His hair was silver, neatly combed. His posture straight despite his age. His expression wasn't angry. It was controlled, focused. "I saw you throw her bag," he said. "I saw you spill the drink. And I heard you at the gate." Gregory rolled his eyes. "Mind your business, Grandpa." The man didn't flinch. It becomes everyone's business when you behave like an animal on a sealed aircraft. The temperature in the cabin shifted. A murmur rippled through the rows behind them. Chloe and Maggie were already moving toward the confrontation, urgency sharpening their steps. Gregory stepped forward, squaring his shoulders. For the first time, his size mattered. He was big, broad, fueled by a toxic mix of alcohol and certainty. "You want to make this your problem?" he said. The man from 2A didn't raise his voice. "Sit down before I make you sit down." For a fraction of a second, it looked like Gregory might swing. Instead, he turned sharply back toward Alyssa. "Get out of my way," he snapped, lifting his hand as if to swat her aside. She flinched, raising her arm instinctively. The threat was unmistakable. "Stop!" Maggie shouted. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the interphone handset mounted near the galley wall and punched in a code. Her hand was steady, but her face had gone pale. "Captain," she said when the line connected, "we have a level 2 threat in first class. Passenger is aggressive, has damaged property, and is physically intimidating others. He is escalating." There was a brief pause. Then a voice answered, calm and cold. "Understood." In the cockpit, Captain Michael Reynolds adjusted his headset. He had been listening to earlier reports, hoping the situation would burn itself out. Men like Gregory often did when confronted with authority. But the word escalating changed everything. "Is the cabin secure?" he asked. "Barely," Maggie replied. "He's threatening passengers." Reynolds glanced at his first officer. "My controls." "Your controls," the first officer confirmed. Reynolds reached past the autopilot. He did not simply turn on the seatbelt sign. He reached for the main address system. Back in first class, Alyssa was clutching the broken laptop to her chest, fingers digging into the warped casing. The weight of it felt obscene now. Useless. Heavy with everything she might lose. Gregory had retreated to his seat, but he wasn't cowed. He leaned back, arms crossed, a smug curl at his lips. The man from 2A remained standing, a quiet barrier between him and Alyssa. Then the cabin lights brightened abruptly. The entertainment screens flickered to black. A low crackle rolled through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice filled the cabin. It wasn't warm. It wasn't reassuring. It was the voice of a man used to command. "This is your captain speaking." Gregory looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Oh, for God's sake. I am speaking directly to the passenger in seat 4K, the captain continued, louder than usual. Gregory froze. Every head in first class turned toward him. Even beyond the curtain, in business and economy, conversations died. People sensed the shift, the way animals sense a storm before the sky darkens. "Sir," Captain Reynolds said, "you appear to be under the impression that this aircraft is your private living room. You are mistaken." Gregory's face drained of color. "You are currently under federal jurisdiction," the captain went on, "and I am the highest authority on this vessel." Alyssa's breath caught. She hadn't realized she was holding it. "I have received reports of assault, destruction of property, and intimidation," Reynolds said evenly. "We are currently over the Atlantic. We are not turning back. However, I want everyone on board to understand what will happen when we land." Gregory's mouth opened, closed. He looked suddenly small in his seat. "I have already contacted authorities in London," the captain said. "They will meet us at the gate. Additionally, I am exercising my right to ban you from this airline for life. Due to alliance agreements, that ban will extend to 15 other carriers." Gregory sagged, his body collapsing inward as if the air had been punched from him. "This can't be legal," he whispered. "Furthermore," Reynolds continued, his voice dropping lower, "the cockpit voice recorder has been enabled to capture cabin audio for the remainder of this flight. Everything you say from this moment forward is being recorded." A pause. Deliberate. Heavy. "Sit down. Buckle your seatbelt. Do not speak to, look at, or breathe in the direction of the passenger in 4A. If I hear a single violation, I will divert this aircraft, and you will explain to foreign law enforcement why you cost this airline tens of thousands of dollars in fuel." The intercom clicked off. The silence that followed was absolute. Gregory shrank into his seat, staring straight ahead. His jaw trembled once, then locked. Alyssa let out a long, shaking breath she hadn't known she was holding. The man from 2A met her eyes and gave a small, respectful nod. Maggie crouched beside Alyssa, pressing a clean towel into her hands. "We'll take care of this," she whispered. Alyssa nodded, though her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She looked down at the laptop again. The screen was dead. The casing bent. The future she'd packed so carefully into that bag felt suddenly fragile, cracked beyond repair. The plane pressed on through the dark sky. For the first time since boarding, Gregory said nothing. But Alyssa could feel him across the aisle like a source of heat. Condensed, silent, dangerous. The captain's announcement had taken his voice. It had not taken his rage. The cabin did not relax after the captain's voice disappeared. It tightened, like a held breath that refused to release. The engines settled into their cruising hum, steady and distant, but inside first class the air felt pressurized by something heavier than altitude. Alyssa stayed perfectly still in her seat. The towel Maggie had given her lay folded in her lap, already damp where champagne had soaked through earlier. Her blouse clung uncomfortably to her skin. Sticky. Cold. She was aware of every sensation now. The vibration beneath her feet. The faint rattle of glassware somewhere behind the galley curtain. The way her heart refused to slow, hammering against her ribs as if it were trying to escape. Across the aisle, Gregory Whitman stared straight ahead. His hands were folded on his thighs, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles shone pale. He did not move. He did not blink. The man who had filled the cabin with his voice minutes earlier now occupied his seat like a statue carved out of resentment. Silence stretched. The man in 2A lowered himself back into his seat with controlled ease. He did not break eye contact with Gregory until he was fully seated, as if daring him to test the boundaries one more time. Gregory did not look back. His jaw worked slowly, grinding something invisible between his teeth. Maggie moved through the cabin with deliberate calm, checking seatbelts, collecting empty glasses, her presence firm and unmistakable. Chloe followed a few steps behind, quieter now, her earlier nervous energy replaced with a sharp vigilance. She avoided Gregory's row entirely, eyes fixed forward whenever she passed. Alyssa tried to focus on her breathing, in through her nose, out through her mouth. She counted silently, the way she had learned to do in stressful meetings, when men talked over her and expected her to disappear. But this was different. This was not a boardroom. This was a metal tube sealed at 35,000 feet, with a man who had already proven he did not care about rules when they inconvenienced him. She risked a glance across the aisle. Gregory's reflection stared back at her from the darkened screen in front of his seat. His eyes were open now, sharp, watching. Not her face directly, but the space around her. Measuring, calculating. The look sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the cabin temperature. She turned away, pressing her forehead briefly against the cool window. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, a black ocean scattered with indifferent stars. Somewhere beneath them, the Atlantic rolled on, unaware of the small human war unfolding above it. Minutes passed, or maybe it was longer. Time felt distorted, elastic. Finally, Maggie stopped beside Alyssa's seat. She crouched slightly to bring her voice low, private. "I'm so sorry," she said. We've documented everything. The captain has notified authorities. You're safe. Safe." The word felt aspirational. Alyssa nodded. "My laptop," she said quietly. Saying it aloud made it real in a way she had been avoiding. "Everything I need for tomorrow is on it." Maggie's expression tightened, professional concern giving way to something closer to anger. "We have witnesses," she said. "Multiple. We will make this right." Alyssa wanted to believe her. She wanted to lean into the reassurance. But 5 years of navigating systems not built for her had taught her caution. Systems were only as good as the people who enforced them. "I appreciate you," she said instead. Maggie held her gaze for a beat longer, then stood. "If you need anything," she said, louder now, for the cabin to hear, "please let me know." She moved on. The cabin lights dimmed incrementally, shifting to the soft twilight setting meant to encourage rest. Privacy dividers slid up around several seats with muted mechanical whispers. Someone reclined. Someone else sighed. The rituals of long-haul flight resumed, but the tension remained, coiled beneath the surface like a live wire. Alyssa did not raise her divider. She wanted to see him. Gregory shifted for the first time since the announcement. just a small adjustment of his shoulders. He reached for the armrest, fingers tapping once, twice, then stilling. His phone lay face down on the console beside him, conspicuously untouched. The man who had boasted loudly about deals and deadlines now sat cut off from the world, forced into stillness by authority he could not buy. Or so it seemed. The seatbelt sign glowed faintly overhead, a reminder of the rules now governing every movement. Alyssa watched as Gregory's eyes flicked upward, noting it, dismissing it. His lips pressed into a thin line. She knew that look. It was not surrender. It was containment. The man in 2A reached across the small gap between their seats and lowered his divider halfway, creating a partial barrier while still allowing sight lines. He leaned slightly toward Alyssa, careful to keep his voice low. "Are you all right?" he asked. His accent was subtle, unmistakably British, softened by years of global travel. There was no pity in his tone, just concern. Alyssa swallowed. "I don't know," she said honestly. "He broke my computer. I have a presentation in the morning." "It's everything." The man nodded slowly, eyes thoughtful. "A bully rarely stops at humiliation," he said, "especially when he's been cornered." She glanced at him. "You think he'll try something else?" "I think," he replied, "that men like him do not accept consequences quietly." That was not comforting, but it felt true. She shifted in her seat, adjusting the towel again. Her body ached with tension, muscles tight from bracing for something that hadn't happened yet. She wondered briefly if this was how prey felt when the predator stopped moving. The silence before the strike. Hours passed in fragments. The cabin settled into a false sleep. Lights dimmed further. Windows darkened completely. Somewhere behind the curtain, a baby cried softly, then quieted. The smell of reheated food drifted faintly through the air, then dissipated. Alyssa did not sleep. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. Every footstep in the aisle drew her attention. She kept her gaze forward, pretending to watch the flight map, the glowing line inching steadily across the ocean. New York fell away behind them. London waited ahead, heavy with consequence. Across the aisle, Gregory remained awake. The only sign of movement was the faint glow that occasionally lit his face as he tilted his phone just enough to activate the screen without lifting it. He was connected now. The in-flight Wi-Fi indicator glowed softly above his console. His fingers moved. Typing. Alyssa felt a fresh wave of unease ripple through her. While she sat trapped in the aftermath of what he had done, he was already working, sending messages, spinning narratives, laying groundwork. The thought tightened something cold and hard in her stomach. She understood then that the captain's intervention, as powerful as it had been, had only shifted the battlefield. The conflict was no longer physical. It was legal, reputational, corporate. A man like Gregory Whitman did not need to raise his voice to hurt someone. He only needed time and access. The man in 2A noticed her stare. He followed her gaze, saw the glow, the subtle movement. His expression darkened almost imperceptibly. "He's planning," he said quietly. Alyssa nodded. "So am I," she replied, though she wasn't sure what that plan was yet. The truth pressed in on her then, heavy and undeniable. She was a black woman in a foreign country, hours from landing, up against a wealthy white man, with lawyers on speed dial and a lifetime of immunity behind him. She knew the statistics. She knew the stories. She had lived enough of them. Her laptop lay broken at her feet, the screen dark, silent. 5 years of work reduced to dead plastic and cracked glass. A tear slipped free before she could stop it, hot against her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, angrily. She would not give him that satisfaction. Not now. Not ever. The engines droned on. The flight pressed eastward. Gregory Whitman sat across from her, silent, connected, dangerous in his stillness. And Alyssa Morgan understood, with a clarity that cut through the fatigue and fear, that this was no longer just about a seat or a flight or a broken computer. This was about who would be believed when the doors finally opened. The smell of coffee arrived before the light. It crept through the cabin in thin waves, signaling morning service and the slow approach of land. Alyssa felt it like a warning bell. Night was ending. Consequences were getting closer. Gregory Whitman straightened in his seat. He rolled his shoulders once, like a man waking from a productive rest. His face looked composed now, refreshed almost. Whatever fury had boiled earlier had cooled into something sharper, focused. He smoothed the front of his jacket, checked his cuffs, adjusted the watch on his wrist. When he glanced at his reflection in the dark window, the expression he practiced was calm, reasonable, wronged. Alyssa saw it and understood. He had rewritten the story already. The seatbelt sign remained on, but Gregory ignored it. He stood, slow and deliberate, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Maggie's head snapped up from the galley. Chloe stiffened near the coffee cart. "I need the restroom," Gregory said casually, already stepping into the aisle. Maggie moved quickly, intercepting him halfway down the row. "Sir, the seatbelt sign is still illuminated. Please return to your seat." Gregory smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not a child." "This is not a request," Maggie replied. For a moment, Alyssa thought he might argue. Instead, he lifted his hands in mock surrender. "Fine. After breakfast." He turned, walking back toward his seat. As he passed row 2, he slowed. Alyssa felt him before she heard him. The shift in air, the invasion of space. He leaned just close enough to be unmistakable, his voice low, smooth, intimate. "I hope you have a very good lawyer." Her breath hitched. "Because by the time I'm done," he continued softly, "you'll be paying for my dry cleaning for the rest of your life." She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the flight map, the glowing line inching toward Europe. "You think a pilot can stop me?" Gregory murmured. "I buy and sell people like him for sport." Alyssa's hands curled into fists in her lap. Her heart pounded, but she stayed still. She refused to give him the reaction he wanted. "Step away from the passenger, now!" Chloe's voice cut through the moment, higher than usual, edged with fear. She stood at the front of the galley, eyes wide, one hand gripping the counter. Gregory straightened immediately, his face rearranging itself into polite irritation. "Relax. I was just heading to the restroom." He brushed past Alyssa's seat shell, close enough that she felt the vibration through the structure, then continued down the aisle. She exhaled shakily. The man in 2A had seen everything. He removed his glasses slowly, folded them with care, and slipped them into his breast pocket. Then he reached into his carry-on and withdrew a sleek black device Alyssa had not noticed before. It was not a phone most people carried. It was heavier. Matte. Purpose-built. "Is the Wi-Fi stable?" he asked quietly. Alyssa blinked. "I think so." "Good," he said. He turned the device on and began typing. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency. Whatever message he was sending, it was short, decisive, final. He did not look at the screen while he typed, his gaze fixed instead on Gregory's back as the man disappeared into the galley. In the narrow space by the coffee maker, Gregory cornered Chloe. She froze when she realized he was blocking her path, his body angled just enough to make it clear she could not pass without touching him. "You're new," he said conversationally. 23? 24. "Sir, please use the restroom and return to your seat," Chloe said, her voice steady but tight. "I'm just saying," Gregory continued, lowering his voice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick money clip, peeling back several crisp bills. "It's he said, she said, "situation, and I have a very long memory for people who help me." He extended the cash toward her. $100 notes, plural. "If you were to recall that she threw the bag at me," he said lightly. "That would be very helpful." Chloe stared at the money, then at his face. Her cheeks flushed, not with temptation, but shock. "Are you trying to bribe me?" she asked, her voice rising. Gregory's smile faltered. "I'm offering a tip." Maggie's voice cut in, sharp as glass. "Chloe." Chloe stepped back immediately. "Witness," she said, loud and clear. Gregory snapped the money back into his pocket, his face darkening. "You stupid girl." Maggie appeared from behind the curtain, her expression granite hard. "Return to your seat now," she said. "If you approach my crew again, we will restrain you. There are zip ties in this galley, and I am praying for a reason to use them." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Gregory's face. He glanced around. Several passengers were watching now, phones discreetly raised, eyes sharp. He sneered, but he moved. As he passed Alyssa again, he did not speak. He did not need to. The confidence in his posture was message enough. This was not over. The plane began its descent. A low shift in engine pitch vibrated through the cabin. The grey light of morning filtered faintly through the windows as they descended through cloud. Alyssa's stomach twisted. England waited below. So did the real fight. She leaned back, exhaustion crashing over her now that adrenaline had begun to fade. Her laptop sat at her feet, broken and silent. She thought of the boardroom, the presentation scheduled for 9 in the morning, the faces that would be waiting for answers she might not have. "I'm going to lose everything," she whispered. The man in 2A turned toward her. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp with something like resolve. "No," he said. "You're not." She looked at him, disbelief written plainly across her face. He smiled then. "Just a little. A humiliated bully is a dangerous thing," he said, "but only if you let him control the narrative." She wiped at her eyes, frustrated by the tears that refused to stay back. "He's powerful." The man nodded. "He has money," he corrected. "Power is something else." The intercom crackled. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing." Gregory Whitman checked his reflection again, smoothing his tie, practicing the face of a misunderstood victim. He believed, truly believed, that he would walk off this plane and bury her in paperwork and pressure until she disappeared. Up in row 2, the man with the black device slipped it back into his bag. Somewhere beyond the clouds, phones were ringing. Decisions were being made. Alyssa did not know it yet, but the story Gregory was telling himself was already collapsing. The wheels hit the runway with a jolt that rattled the cabin and sent a sharp vibration through Alyssa's bones. The sound was violent, final, like a gavel striking wood. Judgment had arrived. The engines roared into reverse, a thunderous rush that drowned out breath and thought alike. Outside the window, grey morning rushed past in streaks. England. Cold, unforgiving. Alyssa pressed her palms flat against the armrests, steadying herself as the aircraft decelerated, her pulse racing ahead of the slowing plane. Across the aisle, Gregory Whitman unbuckled the instant the speed dropped below a sprint. The seatbelt sign was still lit. He did not care. "Sir, remain seated." Maggie's voice came over the cabin, sharp now, stripped of courtesy. "We are not at the gate." Gregory rose anyway. He smoothed his jacket, checked his cuffs, the same ritual as before, as if preparation alone could bend reality. He looked consoled, almost bored. The man who had threatened and bribed and shattered property now wore the face of someone mildly inconvenienced. "I have a schedule," he said loudly. "I'm not waiting for theatrics." Alyssa felt the adrenaline surge back, hot and unwelcome. She stayed seated, eyes forward, heart pounding. The man in 2A did not stand. He watched Gregory with a stillness that felt deliberate, like a hunter waiting for the trap to spring. The plane lurched into a slow taxi. The engine settled into a lower whine. The cabin, which moments earlier had been vibrating with motion, fell into a tense, anticipatory quiet. No one stood. No one reached for bags. Everyone knew something was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice filled the cabin again, this time stripped of ceremony. "Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Authorities will be boarding the aircraft to remove a passenger." Gregory rolled his eyes. "This is harassment," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. He reached up, yanking his carry-on from the overhead bin with a careless tug. "Sir," Maggie called, "sit down." He ignored her and stepped into the aisle, turning toward the door just as the jet bridge connected with a heavy metallic thud. The cabin door opened. Cold air rushed in, sharp and real, carrying with it the scent of rain and concrete. 2 officers stepped on board. They were not the friendly caricatures Gregory expected. They wore high-visibility vests over dark, tactical uniforms, faces set, eyes alert. Behind them came a sergeant, older, broader, his expression unreadable. Gregory's posture shifted instantly. He straightened, shoulders back, smile sliding into place like a well-worn mask. "Officers," he said, voice warm. "Thank goodness you're here. I'd like to file a report against this crew for unlawful detention." The sergeant didn't return the smile. He stepped forward, closing the distance until Gregory's confidence wavered. "Gregory Whitman," he said evenly. "Yes," Gregory replied, irritation flickering. "And before you, I am arresting you," the sergeant continued, "on suspicion of common assault, criminal damage, attempted bribery, and endangering the safety of an aircraft." The words landed one by one, each heavier than the last. The color drained from Gregory's face so fast it looked like a physical blow. "Excuse me," he laughed, a thin, brittle sound. "You can't be serious. Do you know who represents me?" "Turn around," the sergeant said. "Hands behind your back." "This is a misunderstanding," Gregory protested, volume rising. "That woman," he gestured vaguely toward Alyssa, "was hysterical the entire flight. She provoked me. I felt threatened." Alyssa shrank back instinctively, her stomach dropping. Here it was. The story he had been crafting. The version where she became the problem. The sergeant didn't look at her. He didn't look at the crew. He looked only at Gregory. "Sir, turn around now." Gregory's calm fractured. "I demand to speak to the captain. This is a conspiracy. That is enough." Captain Michael Reynolds stepped out of the cockpit, his face drawn with exhaustion and controlled fury. In his hand, he held a sealed evidence bag containing a small digital drive. "Officers," Reynolds said, ignoring Gregory entirely, "this is the audio export from the cockpit voice recorder, covering the duration of the incident. It captures Mr. Whitman's threats, his admission of property damage, and his attempted bribery of my flight attendant." Gregory stared at the bag. His mouth opened, closed. "That's illegal," he said weakly. "You didn't have my consent." "I do not need your consent to ensure safety," Reynolds replied. "Get him off my plane." The officers moved in unison. Hands gripped Gregory's arms, twisting them back. The click of the cuffs echoed through the cabin, loud and final. As they dragged him down the aisle, Gregory thrashed, rage and fear finally spilling free. His eyes scanned the seats wildly until they locked onto Alyssa. "You're dead," he screamed. "You hear me? I'll bury you. You'll never work in this country again." Alyssa looked up. Her heart pounded, but she did not look away. She did not flinch. For the first time, she saw him clearly. Not powerful, not untouchable, just loud and desperate and afraid. "Keep moving," an officer snapped, shoving Gregory forward. As he was hauled off the plane, kicking and shouting obscenities, a ripple of applause began somewhere behind the curtain. It spread, hesitant at first, then louder, filling the cabin with a sound that felt both vindicating and surreal. Alyssa did not clap. She stared down at the broken laptop in her lap, the cracked screen reflecting the cabin lights. Gregory was gone. But the damage remained. The terminal blurred by after that. Fluorescent lights. Quiet instructions. Because of the incident, Alyssa, the man from 2A, and several crew members were escorted to a private holding lounge near the gate. Grey sofas, a vending machine humming softly in the corner, a place designed to be neutral, forgettable. Alyssa sat heavily, the weight of the night finally crushing down on her. It was 7:30 in the morning. Her presentation was scheduled for 9. She pulled out her phone and dialed her boss in Chicago. Voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Her throat tightened. "I'm going to lose my job," she whispered, staring at the dead screen of her laptop. 5 years. Gone. The man from 2A stood near the window, watching ground crew unload luggage from the aircraft. He turned slowly, studying her with a calm intensity that felt grounding. "Why do you think that?" he asked. "Because I was supposed to close a deal today," Alyssa said. "All the data was on that computer. Without it, I'm just a story, an inconvenience." He walked over and sat across from her, placing the black device on the table between them. "A story can be powerful," he said quietly, "especially when it's true." Alyssa looked up at him, confusion and exhaustion warring on her face. "What if," he continued, "the man who tried to destroy your work just handed you something far more valuable?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, a glint of something sharp in his eyes. "Let's just say," he said, "that the ground is not as solid beneath Gregory Whitman as he believes." Somewhere outside the lounge, phones rang. Doors opened. Decisions moved forward. Alyssa did not know it yet, but the worst night of her career was about to become the reason she would never be underestimated again. Alyssa stared at the man across from her, trying to reconcile the calm certainty in his voice with the chaos still ringing in her ears. The lounge hummed softly, a vending machine clicking somewhere behind her, the distant echo of airport announcements bleeding through the walls. Everything felt suspended, like the world had paused to catch its breath. "What did he hand me?" she asked. The man considered her for a moment. Up close, she noticed the details she had missed before, the way his posture never quite relaxed. The watch on his wrist was understated, but unmistakably expensive. His eyes, steady and observant, missed nothing. "My name is Henry Caldwell," he said finally. "And I don't believe in coincidence." Alyssa nodded slowly. She was too tired to question the strangeness of the moment. "Alyssa Morgan," she replied. "Senior Vice President of Operations at Synergy Logistics," Henry finished for her. She stiffened. "How do you know that?" Henry smiled faintly. "Because Gregory Whitman wasn't flying to London for leisure." The words sank in slowly. Alyssa's mind, dulled by exhaustion, began to sharpen. "He said he had a deal." "Yes," Henry said. "And not just any deal. Synergy." The room tilted. Alyssa gripped the edge of the table. "That's not possible. He's not on our side." Henry shook his head. "He isn't. He's on the other side of your boardroom table." The implications crashed into her all at once. Gregory's hostility, his fixation, the way he'd zeroed in on her before she'd even spoken. "He knew who I was," she whispered. He knew exactly who you were, Henry confirmed, and more importantly, he knew what you represented. Alyssa felt a hollow open in her chest. Then it's over. If he's leading the acquisition and I'm pressing charges, my company will cut me loose to protect the deal. Henry leaned back slightly, folding his hands. That would be true, he said, if Gregory Whitman were the one holding the leverage. She looked up at him. Isn't he? Henry reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim card, placing it face up on the table. Cream-colored, heavy stock. Minimalist. The name at the center stopped Alyssa's breath. Henry Caldwell, Chairman, Vanguardian Group. Her pulse thundered in her ears. You own the airline, she said faintly. We own the airline, Henry corrected. Among other things. The room felt suddenly too small. And Vanguardian is backing the synergy deal. Yes, Henry said, which means Halloway Capital needs my vote. Alyssa let out a shaky laugh that bordered on hysteria. He sat next to you, threatened people in front of you, and had no idea. Henry's smile was thin. Gregory is a man who reads price tags, not people. Silence settled between them, thick with understanding. Henry picked up the black device and turned it toward her. I sent a message from the air, he said. Verification requests, cross-references, confirmation of Gregory's position and exposure. Alyssa swallowed. And the board has been briefed, Henry said calmly. As of this morning, Vanguardian is withdrawing support from the acquisition. Effective immediately. Her breath left her in a rush. You can do that? I already did. Alyssa pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. My presentation. The data. It's gone. Henry shook his head. It isn't. She frowned. My laptop is destroyed. Yes, he agreed. But your company's servers are not. Your work was mirrored to Chicago nightly. Alyssa's eyes filled again, this time with something dangerously close to hope. I thought the backup had been glitching. It was, Henry said. Until it wasn't. I made sure I'd addressed it as soon as we landed. She stared at him. Why? Henry's gaze softened. Because I have a daughter your age, he said quietly, and because I've spent my life watching men like Gregory mistake arrogance for power. A knock sounded at the door. A uniformed officer stepped in. Ms. Morgan, we're ready to take your formal statement. Alyssa straightened instinctively. Her shoulders squared. The fear that had clung to her since boarding began to loosen its grip. I'll be right there, she said. The officer nodded and stepped back out. Henry rose, buttoning his jacket. I'll accompany you. They walked together through the corridor, the sterile walls reflecting a version of herself Alyssa barely recognized. Tired, rumpled, but standing taller than she had hours earlier. The holding room smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Gregory Whitman sat cuffed to a metal bench, one hand shackled to a bar on the wall. His suit was rumpled now, his hair slightly out of place. But his mouth still worked, still barking orders at a young constable who pretended not to hear him. When Alyssa entered, Gregory looked up and sneered. There she is. Come to drop the charges. Smart move. Alyssa stopped in front of him. She felt an unexpected calm settle over her, deep and steady. I'm here to add to my statement, she said. You threatened me in the terminal. You assaulted me on the plane. You destroyed my property, and you attempted to bribe a flight attendant. Gregory laughed, a high, brittle sound. You have nothing. By noon, I'll own your company. Henry stepped forward into view. Gregory's words died in his throat. His eyes dropped to Henry's face, then to the card still resting on the table beside Alyssa's statement papers. No, Gregory whispered. Henry met his gaze without pity. The deal is dead, he said, and your partners are drafting your termination paperwork as we speak. Gregory's bravado collapsed in on itself. His shoulders sagged. You can't do this. You did this, Alyssa said softly. You thought you were untouchable. Gregory's eyes flicked between them, panic blooming. Please. Henry turned away first. Take care of her statement, he said to the officer. I'll wait outside. Alyssa followed him out minutes later, her signature drying on the final page. The corridor felt brighter now, lighter. Outside, through the glass, London morning waited. Grey, honest, real. Henry gestured toward the exit. There's a car waiting. New laptop. Your files will be restored before you reach the office. Alyssa paused, emotion swelling in her chest. Thank you. Henry smiled, just a little. You didn't need saving, he said. You just needed someone to listen. They walked out together, leaving Gregory Whitman behind, finally small and silent. For the first time since boarding, Alyssa believed it. She had not been underestimated. She had been witnessed. London rain traced thin silver lines down the tinted windows as the car pulled away from the terminal, the airport receding into a blur of steel and glass. Alyssa sat back against the leather seat, hands folded in her lap, feeling the tremor finally catch up to her, now that there was space to breathe. The city outside moved with a steady indifference. Buses hissing, pedestrians hunched against the drizzle, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had just happened 35,000 feet above the Atlantic. The laptop sat beside her, pristine and new, its weight unfamiliar but reassuring. Henry had placed it there himself before closing the door, his movements precise, efficient, as if he were sealing a promise. She had not opened it yet. Not because she was afraid, but because part of her wanted to sit with the moment before work rushed back in and claimed it. You don't owe anyone a performance today, Henry said from the seat across from her, his voice low over the muted hum of the engine. Take the time you need. Alyssa nodded, though she knew she wouldn't. She had spent too long fighting to be seen to step back now. The rain thickened as they crossed the Thames, grey water folding in on itself beneath the bridge. The car turned, heading toward the city's financial core, buildings rising like sentinels on either side of the road. Her phone buzzed, a Chicago number. She hesitated, then answered. Marcus. On the other end, her boss exhaled, relief plain in the sound. Thank God. We were trying to reach you. I heard something happened on the flight. Yes, Alyssa said evenly. She glanced at Henry, who gave a small nod. "But I'll be at headquarters shortly. I'll have everything ready." There was a pause. "The board meeting has been postponed," Marcus said carefully. "Temporarily." Alyssa closed her eyes. "Postponed?" "Yes. Vanguardian withdrew support this morning. The acquisition is off." The word settled into place, solid and undeniable. "I know," she said. Another pause. Then quieter. "We owe you an apology." Alyssa opened her eyes, watching the city slide past. "Let's talk when I arrive." She ended the call and set the phone down, her pulse steady now, focused. The car slowed as they pulled up to a glass-fronted building that reflected the grey sky back at itself. The driver opened the door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. Inside, the building hummed with restrained urgency. Security nodded them through. People glanced up from desks, their curiosity flickering briefly before being swallowed by professionalism. Alyssa felt it then, the shift in how she was seen. Not pity, not suspicion, attention. The boardroom was already prepared when they arrived. Coffee steamed at one end of the long table. Screens glowed softly, waiting. Alyssa took her seat without ceremony, opened the laptop, and pressed the power button. The screen lit instantly. Her files were there. Every model, every slide. Restored, intact, waiting as if nothing had ever been lost. The knot in her chest loosened at last, releasing a breath she had been holding for days, weeks, maybe years. Henry stood at the far end of the room, speaking quietly with two executives. When he caught her eye, he nodded once. That was all. No grand gestures, no speeches, just acknowledgement. The meeting began. Questions came fast at first, probing, cautious. Alyssa answered them with the same clarity she had always brought. But now there was an edge to her voice that hadn't been there before. Not defensive, assured. She laid out the risks that had nearly been hidden, the costs that would have hollowed the company out from the inside. She spoke of supply chains and margins, but also of people, of what happened when decisions were made by those who never felt their consequences. The room listened. By the time she finished, the rain had stopped. Pale light filtered through the windows, softening the hard lines of the city. A vote was taken, unanimous. As the room emptied, Marcus lingered. "You handled yourself," he said quietly. "On the plane. Here. We didn't protect you the way we should have." Alyssa met his gaze. "I protected myself," she said. "I just need the system to stop punishing people for doing that." He nodded, chastened. "That's fair." Outside the boardroom, Henry waited, hands clasped behind his back. "You did well," he said. "So did you," Alyssa replied. He smiled faintly. "I did what anyone with a conscience should do." They walked out together into the open air. The city had brightened, puddles catching fragments of sky. Alyssa felt lighter than she had in months, though she knew the memory of the flight would not fade quickly. Trauma didn't disappear just because justice arrived on time. But it no longer owned her. Her phone buzzed again, a message this time, an unknown number It was a photograph, a security badge, clipped to a plastic holder. The name printed beneath the photo read Gregory Whitman. The badge lay on a metal desk, discarded. Beneath the image, a single line of text appeared. Employment terminated. Alyssa stared at it for a moment, then deleted the message. She did not need proof of his fall. She had already moved past it. Henry watched her slip the phone back into her pocket. "Some lessons," he said, "are expensive." Alyssa nodded. "For him." They stood there for a moment longer, the city breathing around them. Somewhere behind the glass and steel, deals would be made, mistakes repeated, power misused. But today, at least, the balance had shifted. Alyssa squared her shoulders and stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. The police holding room smelled of industrial cleaner and old coffee, a scent that clung to the back of the throat. Gregory Whitman sat on the metal bench with his wrists cuffed, one ankle crossed over the other in a posture that tried and failed to look composed. The bravado had thinned. What remained was calculation. He watched the door like a man waiting for a verdict he believed he could still buy. It opened without ceremony. Alyssa stepped inside, her heels quiet on the concrete floor. Captain Michael Reynolds followed, then Henry Caldwell. The officer at the desk nodded once and stepped back, giving them space. The room felt smaller with all of them in it, the walls pressing in, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a persistent question. Gregory's mouth curved into a familiar sneer. "Back already?" he said. "Have you come to do the sensible thing?" Alyssa stopped at the center of the room. She did not raise her voice. She did not rush. She looked at him the way she had learned to look at risk, measured, precise, unafraid. "I'm here to complete my statement," she said. Gregory laughed, but the sound cracked. "You're making a mistake. This is still salvageable." Captain Reynolds crossed his arms. He did not look at Gregory. He looked at the officer. "For the record," he said evenly, "the audio has been transferred to the Crown Prosecution Service." Gregory's eyes flicked toward him, sharp with irritation. "You think that's going to hold up?" Henry stepped forward then, placing a business card on the narrow table with a soft, deliberate tap. Gregory glanced down, then froze. The sneer vanished. His face went pale, the color draining as if pulled by gravity. Gregory whispered. Henry's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Yes." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Gregory's breath came faster now. He licked his lips, eyes darting between them. "You can't do this," he said, the words tumbling over each other. "I have partners. Contracts. You don't understand how exposed you're making yourselves." Alyssa took a step closer. She felt something shift inside her, a steadiness she had not known she possessed. "You threatened me," she said. "You assaulted me, you destroyed my property, and you tried to bribe a flight attendant. Those are facts, not opinions." Gregory shook his head, desperation creeping in. "I was provoked." Henry's gaze hardened. "You were revealed." The officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitman," he said, "you'll be processed shortly." Gregory's shoulders slumped. The posture he had worn like armor finally cracked. He looked smaller now, not because of the cuffs, but because the story he told himself about who he was had collapsed. "This isn't over," he muttered, clinging to the last thread of menace. Alyssa met his eyes. "For me it is." She turned away before he could answer. Outside, the air felt cleaner. The city hummed with a low, living energy, cars passing, footsteps echoing, voices rising and falling. Captain Reynolds paused beside them, exhaustion etched into the lines of his face. "You handled yourself with restraint," he said to Alyssa. "Not everyone would have." Alyssa nodded. "You listened," she replied. That mattered. He inclined his head once. "The pilot is always listening," he said, then turned back toward the terminal, his part complete. Henry and Alyssa walked together toward the waiting car. Rain had washed the streets clean, leaving them slick and reflective, the city mirrored in broken pieces beneath their feet. The days that followed moved quickly. Charges were filed, statements recorded. The airline issued a formal ban. Gregory's firm released a carefully worded announcement that said nothing and admitted everything. His name disappeared from their website by nightfall. By the end of the week, it was everywhere else. Alyssa returned to Chicago to a different reception than the one she had feared. The boardroom felt changed, as if the walls themselves had shifted an inch closer to her. Conversations paused when she entered. Eyes followed. Not with suspicion, with recognition. She closed the deal, not with bravado, but with clarity. She spoke of risk, of resilience, of the cost of ignoring behavior, because it arrived wrapped in wealth. The vote passed without dissent. A promotion followed, not as a reward for endurance, but as an acknowledgement of leadership already demonstrated. She accepted it without apology. At night, the memory of the flight still visited her, the grip on her wrist, the sound of the bag hitting the floor, the quiet after the captain's voice. Trauma did not vanish just because justice arrived, but it loosened its hold little by little as she reclaimed the narrative. One evening, weeks later, she received a message from Henry. A single line. "Coffee tomorrow?" They met at a quiet place near the river. He looked older in daylight, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his presence was the same, grounded, attentive. "You didn't need me," he said after a while. Alyssa smiled. "I needed someone to believe me." He nodded. "We all do, at some point." They sat in companionable silence, watching the water move. Somewhere across the city, a system churned on, imperfect and powerful. But Alyssa no longer felt small within it. News came eventually, as it always did. Gregory pled. Settlements followed. Restrictions were imposed. His world narrowed to court dates and compliance meetings, to rooms without windows and conversations without leverage. Alyssa did not follow the details closely. She did not need to. On a clear morning, months later, she boarded another flight. Different destination. Same confidence. As she took her seat, she caught her reflection in the window. Steady, unflinching. The engine spooled up. The cabin settled, and this time, the quiet felt earned. The morning she flew again, Alyssa arrived early, not because she was nervous, but because she liked the quiet before the rush. The terminal was waking up slowly, lights humming, coffee machines sputtering to life, the soft drag of luggage wheels echoing across polished floors. She moved through it with an ease that surprised her. No hesitation, no second guessing. Her boarding pass rested loosely between her fingers, no longer something she needed to clutch. First class. She noticed the word without flinching. At the gate, a man in a tailored jacket glanced at her, then looked away. A woman nearby smiled politely. No one questioned her presence. No one felt entitled to explain the rules. Alyssa stood where she belonged, not because anyone granted her permission, but because she had claimed it and paid the price for keeping it. As she boarded, the jet bridge swallowed the noise of the terminal behind her. The same shift, the same hush. But this time, it didn't feel fragile. It felt earned. She stepped into the cabin and took her seat, setting her bag down with care. The window reflected her face back at her, calm, alert, unmistakably present. The engines hadn't started yet when she felt it, a flicker of memory that rose uninvited. The scream, the grip, the sound of something breaking that couldn't be replaced. She let the feeling pass through her instead of pushing it away. Trauma did not vanish when ignored. It loosened when acknowledged. Across the aisle, a stranger adjusted his headphones. Somewhere behind her, a child laughed. Life, ordinary and relentless, continued to move. She thought of Gregory Whitman, not with satisfaction, but with distance. The news had been efficient. Conviction, settlements, quiet bans that carried loud consequences. His name had become a cautionary footnote in boardrooms that once echoed with his confidence. He was not ruined by one moment of cruelty. He was revealed by it. Alyssa had learned something else in the process. Power did not announce itself with volume. It did not pound tables or spill drinks. Real power listened. It waited. It recorded. It acted when the moment mattered. She closed her eyes briefly as the cabin door sealed shut, the soft thud resonating through the aircraft. 35,000 feet above the ground, there would be nowhere to run again. But she was no longer afraid of that. She understood now that the altitude didn't trap people, it exposed them. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engine spooled. The vibration beneath her feet was steady, reassuring. She watched the city slide past the window, buildings shrinking, streets narrowing into lines. Somewhere below, lives intersected and diverged. Stories collided and continued. Alyssa opened her laptop, the same one that had once shattered on a cabin floor. This one was intact, updated, backed up twice over. The screen glowed to life, waiting. Her work was there. Her future was there. But more importantly, so was her voice. She typed for a while, then paused, fingers hovering over the keys. She wasn't thinking about margins or logistics now. She was thinking about moments, about the cost of silence, about the quiet courage it took to stay seated when someone wanted to move you. When the plane lifted off, the force pressed her back gently, firmly, like a reminder. She smiled, just a little. By the time the seatbelt sign chimed off, She was already ahead of schedule. Somewhere in the cabin, a flight attendant made an announcement, calm and practiced. Alyssa listened, the words blending into the rhythm of flight. She knew now that someone was always listening, that accountability did not end at the edge of authority, that character revealed itself most clearly when no one thought it mattered. She closed the laptop and looked out the window again, clouds stretching endlessly, indifferent and beautiful. What had happened to her was not small. It was not isolated. It was a reflection of something larger, something many recognized but few confronted until it reached their own seat. Her story was not about revenge. It was about consequence, about the quiet power of being believed, about what happens when systems work the way they are supposed to, and when people inside them choose integrity over convenience. The plane leveled out, the cabin settled, the journey continued. If this story moved you, take a moment to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share your thoughts by commenting 3 words that speak to you most.